The Roman army didn't simply conquer half the known world through sheer numbers or brute force. Behind every crushing victory lay a collection of battlefield tactics so creative, so psychologically devastating, and so meticulously engineered that historians are still studying them 2,000 years later. From the shores of Carthage to the forests of Germania, Roman commanders repeatedly proved that wars are won not just with swords, but with cunning minds. Here are some of the most extraordinary and surprising battle tactics that made the Roman legions the most feared fighting force in the ancient world. Perhaps the most iconic Roman battlefield formation is the testudo or tortoise formation. When legionaries faced a hailstorm of enemy arrows or projectiles, they didn't scatter or retreat. Instead, they locked their rectangular shields, called scuta, together in a seamless, overlapping shell. Soldiers on the outer edges held their shields outward, while those in the middle raised theirs overhead, creating a nearly impenetrable box of interlocking wood and iron. The result looked less like an army and more like a slow-moving armored vehicle crawling across the battlefield. Ancient accounts describe how enemy arrows simply bounced off the formation, and in some cases, horses reportedly walked across the top of the shield roof. While movement in the testudo was slow and cumbersome, it allowed Roman soldiers to advance under heavy fire, close the distance to enemy walls and gates, and survive conditions that would have decimated a less disciplined force. It was engineering applied to human bodies, and it worked brilliantly. One of the most psychologically devastating tactics in the Roman playbook was the deliberate, calculated fake retreat. To an untrained enemy, watching Roman soldiers suddenly turn and run was an intoxicating sight. Tribal warriors, fueled by adrenaline and the scent of apparent victory, would inevitably break formation and charge in pursuit exactly as the Romans wanted. Once the enemy had fully committed to the chase and abandoned any defensive structure, Roman cavalry would swing in from both flanks, while the retreating infantry pivoted and re-engaged head-on. The enemy, now disorganized, breathless, and surrounded on multiple sides, rarely stood a chance. This tactic required extraordinary discipline. Every soldier had to trust the plan completely, run convincingly enough to bait the enemy, and turn back to fight at precisely the right moment. Lesser armies would have collapsed into a real retreat. The Romans turned pretend defeat into a death trap. Rome's early naval history was somewhat embarrassing. The Carthaginians had been sailing for centuries, and when the First Punic War forced Rome into open-water combat, the Romans knew they couldn't win a traditional naval engagement. So they didn't try to. Instead, Roman engineers invented the corvus, a rotating boarding bridge mounted on the bow of a warship, fitted with a heavy iron spike at its end. When an enemy ship drew close, the corvus was dropped. The spike drove into the enemy deck, locking the two ships together, and Roman soldiers, masters of close-quarters infantry combat, stormed across and turned the naval battle into a ground fight. Suddenly, Carthage's superior seamanship meant almost nothing. Rome had effectively brought the land to the sea. The corvus helped Rome win several crucial early naval battles, and fundamentally changed the balance of power in the Mediterranean. It remains one of the most creative adaptations in military history. When Julius Caesar besieged the Gallic chieftain Vercingetorix at the hilltop stronghold of Alesia in 52 BCE, he faced a seemingly impossible problem. The fortress was packed with tens of thousands of warriors, and a massive Gallic relief army was on its way. Caesar was, in effect, trapped between two enormous enemy forces. His solution was breathtaking in its audacity. He ordered his legions to build two complete rings of fortifications, one facing inward around Alesia to contain Vercingetorix, and another facing outward to defend against the relief army. In total, his men constructed nearly 35 kilometers of walls, ditches, palisades, towers, and booby-trapped pits in just a matter of weeks. Caesar then held both lines simultaneously, fighting enemies on two fronts, while his soldiers were already exhausted from construction. Vercingetorix eventually surrendered. The relief army collapsed and fled. Rome had won not through superior numbers, but through engineering, logistics, and an almost supernatural level of organizational discipline. Alesia stands today as one of the greatest feats of military engineering ever recorded. The Romans understood long before modern psychology that war is as much a mental contest as a physical one. They weaponized fear deliberately and creatively. Before major battles, Roman soldiers would beat their swords rhythmically against their shields, producing a thunderous wall of metallic noise designed to rattle the nerves of opposing armies. War standards, gleaming eagle emblems, and elaborate battle dress were all partly designed to project an image of invincible power. In sieges, the Romans would sometimes massacre the entire population of a city that chose prolonged resistance, then make absolutely certain that neighboring towns heard about it in detail. The brutal calculus was simple. The cost of early surrender was humiliation and tribute. The cost of defiance was annihilation. Many cities chose to open their gates without a fight, once word spread of what Roman patience looked like when it finally ran out. Caesar himself wrote extensively about managing enemy perception, noting that psychological dominance often did as much work as his legions. Fear, properly cultivated, was free, inexhaustible, and devastatingly effective. Unlike many ancient armies that fought in rigid, unchanging blocks, Roman legions were designed from the ground up to be modular and adaptable. The basic tactical unit, the maniple, and later the cohort, could operate independently, change direction mid-battle, reinforce weak points, or exploit enemy gaps without waiting for orders to cascade down through the chain of command. This allowed Roman commanders to execute something enemies rarely expected: mid-battle tactical adjustments. While Carthaginian or Persian formations might be committed entirely to a single plan, a Roman general could read the battlefield in real time, pull units from quieter sectors, and hammer an exposed flank or crumbling line with fresh troops. At the Battle of Zama in 202 BCE, Scipio Africanus used precisely this kind of lateral troop repositioning to neutralize Hannibal's war elephants and pave the way for a decisive Roman victory. Flexibility was trained into every soldier. It wasn't improvisation, it was disciplined adaptability, which is arguably more impressive. Roman commanders thought well beyond the immediate battlefield. When besieging a fortified position, they regularly manipulated the surrounding environment to their advantage. Rivers were diverted to flood enemy positions, or, conversely, dammed to drain the water supplies of besieged cities. In mountain terrain, Roman engineers would cut roads overnight, so that by dawn, legions appeared in positions enemies had considered completely inaccessible. During the siege of Carthage in the Third Punic War, Roman forces under Scipio Aemilianus constructed a massive mole, a stone and earthwork barrier, across the harbor mouth, cutting off Carthaginian supply lines from the sea. When the Carthaginians responded by secretly digging a new harbor exit, the Romans simply blocked that too. The entire city fell shortly after. Environmental control wasn't an afterthought, it was a primary strategic tool. What made the Roman military machine so extraordinary wasn't any single tactic. It was the combination of relentless discipline, engineering genius, psychological sophistication, and an institutional culture that transformed lessons from every defeat into the foundation of future victories. After the catastrophic loss at Cannae in 216 BCE, arguably the worst military defeat in Roman history, Rome didn't surrender. It studied Hannibal, adapted, and eventually destroyed him. Rome's craziest tactics weren't crazy at all. They were methodical, creative solutions to specific problems, developed by men who took warfare as seriously as any science. In a world where most armies relied on raw courage and overwhelming numbers, Rome brought something far more dangerous: a system. And that system, refined over centuries, built an empire that the modern world is still living in the shadow.